I hurt myself today.
Country music never came from spotless lives. It came from bruised knuckles on cheap guitars, from midnight apologies and morning headlines, from miles of highway that teach you who you are. The records sparkle, but under the shine there is grit, and under the grit there is a heart still beating hard enough to shake the mic. This is the part the posters don't print. The restless love, the bar fights, the pills, the promises kept and broken. The way a melody can turn a mistake into something you can live with. If you think you know these legends, listen again. The stories behind the songs are louder, stranger, and more human than any myth. Hank Williams Sr. wrote like a man trying to outpace a storm and sang like one who knew it would catch him anyway. He packed a lifetime into 29 years, turning raw pain into verses that still sting. The bottle kept calling his name, pills lined up like little doors he could step through, and he stepped through too often. He was brilliant and brittle, funny and doomed, a comet over a small town. When people say country music tells the truth, they mean the sound of Hank refusing to flinch. Johnny Cash lived like a sermon shouted through a busted speaker. He fell, he got up, he fell again, and every time the voice got deeper. There were arrests, there were pills, there was a fire that roared where it never should have, and there was always that black coat, a promise to stand with the troubled. He loved June like a vow and chased redemption like a tour schedule. The outlaw image wasn't a costume. It was a map of dents he refused to hide. Waylon Jennings did not ask Nashville for permission. He taped the rules to his amplifier and blasted through them, trading polish for pulse. Coke rode shotgun for a while. The night stretched thin, and the groove turned mean and beautiful. He made freedom sound heavy and necessary, a drum beat you could lean on. When he finally cut loose from the worst habits, the swagger stayed, because the swagger was earned. Willie Nelson floated like smoke and cut like a pocket knife. He wrote forgiveness into melodies you can hum in your sleep, and then lived a life that needed forgiving. Marriages spun. A surprise bill lit a fuse at home, and the bus never stopped rolling. He kept a poet's calm and a hustler's energy, turning trouble into charm without pretending it never happened. That gentle voice hides a stubborn spine and a survivor's grin. Merle Haggard walked into country wearing prison dust and walked out wearing a crown he never polished. He could be tender at breakfast and furious by noon, a man who argued with himself and won on tape. 5 marriages, a temper with a hair trigger, and a catalog that made barrooms feel like courtrooms. Merle built complexity into hooks. He taught the genre how to confess and still stand tall. George Jones turned chaos into opera. He missed shows, he ran out of second chances, he rode a mower to town because the keys were gone, and then he opened his mouth and the room forgot to breathe. He poured regret like fine whiskey and made apologies sound noble. Love was a battlefield. The tabloids were always waiting, but the microphone was home. David Allan Coe treated respectability like a dare. He wrote clean hits and scandalous ones, bragged until it became theater, and wore controversy like a jacket with the sleeves torn off. You could frown at a lyric and still nod to the beat because the man knew hooks. He kept finding fences and testing how sturdy they were. Jerry Lee Lewis slammed piano keys until sparks flew and smiled like the chaperones had already left. One decision detonated a tour, turned headlines vicious, and chased him for decades. Still, the playing was undeniable, a wildfire that burned shame and praise with the same heat. You can argue with his choices. You cannot argue with the roar of that left hand. Chris Christopherson wrote like a man who had slept in the back of love and woke with a pen. He was golden on camera and messy off it, a romantic who understood the trapdoor under romance. Rumors swirled because he kept living big, but the songs are the proof he knew both tenderness and aftermath. He made risk sound worth it. Townes Van Zandt carried a quiet that felt dangerous. He smiled like a saint and drank like a ghost, then sang lines so perfect they cut the air. He loved and left, drifted and returned, and every time the songs were colder and clearer. You cannot fix a man with a melody, but Townes proved a melody can explain him. Conway Twitty could flirt with a camera so well, a living room fell silent. 4 marriages later, the wink still worked. And so did the rumor mill. He sold romance professionally and chased it personally, which is a dangerous double shift. The records feel like a slow dance you know will end and still hope it won't. Porter Wagoner wore rhinestones like armor and ran his show like a ship at sea. Partnerships buckled under contracts and control. Friendships bent under pressure, and the laughs on TV hid the clang of business backstage. He proved glitter can protect and cut at the same time. Buck Owens invited America to smile and then admitted he had lived too fast for tidy jokes. The Bakersfield sound was freedom with a steel guitar strapped on, and Buck rode it hard. He loved broadly, confessed honestly, and learned that hearts are not rentals. The twang still feels brand new because the truth inside it is permanent. Ray Price crooned like velvet and traveled like a long-haul driver. He slept on buses, modernized the sound, and wore a gentleman's mask that sometimes slipped at the edges. Whispers about open flings trailed him, but he kept the waltz steady. Grace with mileage, that was his signature. Charlie Rich sang tenderness so soft it could hush a fight, and then torched a ceremony with a lighter in his fist. He drank, he brooded, he loved with messy sincerity. Elegance fit him like a suit until the seams popped. He made beauty and danger share a stage. Billy Joe Shaver wrote verses that looked carved into barnwood. A confrontation outside a bar turned into gunfire and then a courtroom, and he walked away acquitted and unrepentant. He kept the swagger, kept the faith, and kept telling the story loud enough to scare complacency. Steve Earle married 7 times, twice to the same woman, and battled a hard needle spiral that almost erased him. He crashed, got clean, and wrote maps for the rest of us on how to walk out of a bad room. The voice roughened, the songs sharpened, and the honesty stopped flinching. Marty Robbins kept the smile spotless and the schedule full. He raced cars, stacked hits, and let rumors chase a shadow they never caught. Charm became his shield and also his riddle. He made mystery sound like music. John Anderson wore a hat brim low and a grin that said he knew the late shift well. He ran toward the party in the early days, then brought that smoke into the studio and made it sing. Honky-tonk stories turned into postcards from the edge, stamped with heart. Gary Stewart wired electricity straight into heartache. His voice yelped and soared, his love turned volatile, and the pills rattled like dice. When his wife was gone, he ended his own life, and silence fell over a neon world. The records still spark when you touch them because they were built hot. Johnny Paycheck gave the working man an anthem, then gave a judge a reason to frown. A barroom gun, a prison term, and the look of a man who believed his own legend. He lived the outlaw brand the hard way. He came back loud, half sorry and half defiant. Shel Silverstein looked like mischief and wrote like a locksmith. He turned jokes into checks and wild nights into hooks other singers could cash. If the 70s needed a jester with a notebook, Shel was happy to audition and then write the script. He made the rowdy sound clever and the clever sound rowdy. Hank Williams Jr. hauled a famous name up a mountain, fell off a cliff, and rebuilt his face and fate. Bar fights, anthems, swagger. He wore them like medals you earn the hard way. He did not flee the shadow. He wrestled it until it fit. Tom T. Hall kept his tone friendly and his details sharp. Insiders whispered about early excess and quiet rooms, but the records poured empathy. He could sketch a stranger so clearly you felt you had shaken their hand. Kindness with teeth. That was his gift. Clint Black walked into town looking like a star and chasing the heat that melts young careers. Stories of fame-hungry flings hung around the early years, the predictable fog that follows a handsome man with a hit. He matured into steadiness, but the origin myth never retired. That is how rumor works. It hums after the last chord. What ties these 25 together is not scandal for its own sake. It is the cost of turning a life into sound. Every dent shows in the tone. Every apology shows in the phrasing. You can hear bottles set down just off mic and tears wiped with the heel of a hand before the verse begins. Country never promised to be clean. It promised to be honest, and honesty is rarely tidy. So listen again. Hear Hank Sr. outrun the storm for one more chorus, and Cash bargaining with his ghosts through a low prayer. Hear Waylon kick the hinges off the rulebook while Willie forgives you before you even know what you did. Let Merle tell you anger is a teacher. Let George Jones show you how regret can sing. Let Coe poke the bruise until it laughs, and let Jerry Lee stomp the keys until shame has to wait outside. Chris will romance you and warn you in the same breath. Towns will whisper frost. Conway will sell the slow dance while Porter counts the cost. Buck will grin. Ray will glide. Charlie will smolder. Billy Joe will swear the truth fits best in a rough cut. Steve will mark an exit route on the wall. Marty will keep secrets that somehow feel generous. John will send trouble a drink and ask it to behave. Gary will remind you heat has a bill. Paycheck will strut and stumble and get back up. Shell will draw a map of the party and hide a moral in the margins. Hank Jr. will carry weight with a roar and a wink. Tom T. will let kindness do the heavy lifting. Clint will prove rumor is only background noise once the melody lands. None of them asked to be saints. They asked to be heard. They were and they still are. If one story here surprised you, good. Surprise keeps the ear awake. If one story stung, good. Sting keeps the heart honest. Drop a thought about the name that changed a favorite song for you, then press play again. The music will meet you where you are, broke, busy, lucky, guilty, hopeful, and walk you to a place that feels like daylight. That is the quiet miracle these records still pull off. They turn wreckage into wisdom, bad choices into warnings, and joy into a souvenir you can carry. Louder than the gossip, tougher than the myth, there is a chorus running through all of it. Real lives, real costs, real songs. When the last note fades, what remains is simple. The legends were human. The music is proof. Before the arena lights and the sponsorships, this music lived in places that smelled like spilled beer and fried food, where a tip jar made the laws and a stage could be a piece of plywood on milk crates. You can fake a pose. The highway between towns becomes a classroom. At mile 80, someone decides to quit. At mile 90, they decide to try again. By the time the van rolls into a new zip code, there is a chorus for it. Waylon taught that lesson with rhythm, inventing freedom you can dance to. Merle wrote dignity for men who had pawn tickets in their pockets. Coe dared a room to boo and then made it clap. Jerry Lee took the piano hostage and demanded all the noise at once. Chris handed poets a passport. Towns showed how to make winter sound like a companion instead of a sentence. Conway delivered heat in a whisper. Porter built a neon cathedral and charged admission in heartbeats. Buck rewired the dance floor. Ray ironed a suit over a restless soul. Charlie kept a match in his pocket just in case the script was wrong again. Billy Joe laughed at fear with a songwriter's drawl. Steve punched a hole through the wall and labeled it exit. Marty treated class like a performance art and made Speedway adrenaline rhyme with tenderness. John shook the dust out of a jukebox and made mischief behave for 3 minutes. Gary stood too close to the light because that is where the color is truest. Paycheck swaggered until the swagger met gravity. Shell scribbled while the room spun and sold wisdom disguised as a joke. Hank Jr. dropped the last name when it got heavy and carried both halves anyway. Tom T. patted your shoulder and stole your tears without asking. Listen close, and you will hear the same moral told 25 ways. Do not pretend. Do not pretend to be pure. Do not pretend to be hopeless. Do not pretend the world is anything but costly and worth it. A good chorus gives you a place to hide. A great chorus gives you a place to stand. When the headlines shout and the phones glare, these records cut the power for a minute and let you feel like a person instead of a project. They are full of men who made messes, cleaned some of them up, and learned to keep singing while they worked. Maybe that is why the old hits still feel current. The technology changed, the gossip sped up, the stages got taller, but the math stayed the same. One human voice plus one honest line can still flood a room. If you found yourself in a hard week, remember how these stories bend. Willie's calm is for the anxious. Merle's stubbornness is for the cornered. George's apology is for the proud. Christofferson's risk is for the careful. Towns's hush is for the overwhelmed. Jerry Lee's roar is for the timid. Wayland's strut is for the boxed in. Coe's nerve is for the silenced. Ray's glide is for the tense. Buck's snap is for the worn out. Porter's showmanship is for the ones who have to act brave before they feel brave. Charlie's flame is for the comfortable. Billy Joe's grin is for the scared. Steve's blueprint is for the stuck. Marty's polish is for the scrappy. John's honky-tonk postcard is for the homesick. Gary's spark is for the numb. Paycheck's chant is for the ground down. Shell's wink is for the serious. Hank Jr.'s bellow is for the unheard. Tom T's story is for the lonely. Clint's steady hand is for the unsure. Put a needle down, press a button, let a speaker do its small miracle, and notice what changes in your chest. The distance between legend and listener shrinks to the length of a verse. Out behind the myths, there are hotel hallways, lobby coffee at 4 a.m., gas stations that know a band by name, and tiny towns that still remember the night a bus door opened and the whole room felt seen. That is the secret industry inside the industry. It is not built out of charts. It is built out of faces that soften when a chorus arrives on time. Every singer here paid in public. Some paid too much. All of them left receipts we can hum. It does not excuse the rough nights or the wreckage. It insists that people can hand their pain to art and make something other people use to live. That exchange is not clean. It is spectacular anyway. If you have ever driven too far for no good reason just to feel the road think under you, you already understand why these names matter. They stood between the noise and the silence and offered a rhythm you could trust. The rest is gossip. The rest is weather. The songs are the landmark you can navigate by when the map looks wrong. Always.